Hello, and welcome back to Taking the Motley Cross, Episode 14, Walking on Water, or as I like to call it, Welcome to the Crazy. Today we're going to be reading from Matthew chapter 14 from the New Revised Standard Version. At that time, Herod the ruler heard reports about Jesus, and he said to his servants, "This is John the Baptist. He's been raised from the dead, and for this reason these powers are at work in him." For Herod had arrested John, bound him, and put him in prison on account of Herodias, his brother Philip's wife, because John had been telling him, "It is not lawful for you to have her." Though Herod wanted to put him to death, he feared the crowd because they regarded him as a prophet. But when Herod's birthday came, the daughter of Herodias danced before the company, and she pleased Herod so much that he promised on oath to grant her whatever she might ask. Prompted by her mother, she said, "Give me the head of John the Baptist here on a platter." The king was grieved, yet out of regard for his oaths and for the guests, he commanded it to be given. He sent and had John beheaded in the prison. The head was brought on a platter and given to the girl, who brought it to her mother. His disciples came and took the body and buried it. Then they went and told Jesus. Now when Jesus heard this, he withdrew from there in a boat to a deserted place by himself. But when the crowds heard it, they followed him on foot from the towns. When he went ashore, he saw a great crowd, and he had compassion on them and cured their sick. When it was evening, the disciples came to him and said, "This is a deserted place, and the hour is now late. Send the crowds away so that they may go into the villages and buy food for themselves." Jesus said to them, "They need not go away. You give them something to eat." They replied, "We have nothing here but 5 loaves and 2 fish." He said, "Bring them here to me." Then he ordered the crowds to sit down on the grass. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven, blessed, and broke the loaves, and he gave them to the disciples. And the disciples gave them to the crowds, and all ate and were filled. And they took up what was left over of the broken pieces, 12 baskets full. And those who ate were about 5,000 men, besides women and children. Immediately he made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of to the other side while he dismissed the crowds. And after he had dismissed them, he went up the mountain by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone, but by this time the boat, battered by the waves, was far from the land, for the wind was against them. And early in the morning he came walking toward them on the sea, but when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified, saying, "It is a ghost!" And they cried out in fear, but immediately Jesus spoke to them and said, "Take heart, it is I, do not be afraid." Peter answered him, "Lord, if it's you, command me to come to you on the water." He said, "Come." So Peter got out of the boat, started walking on the water, and came toward Jesus. But when he noticed the strong wind, he became frightened, and beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." Jesus immediately reached out his hand and caught him, saying to him, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" When they got into the boat, the wind ceased, and those in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." And when they had crossed over, they came to land at Gennesaret. After the people of that place recognized him, they sent word throughout the region and brought all who were sick to him and begged him that they might touch even the fringe of his cloak. And all who touched it were healed. The word of the Lord. Over breakfast, they found out that John the Baptist, the voice crying out in the wilderness, was dead. Then when they tried to get away for lunch and get to some deserted place, to get off the radar, to get off the grid, they find the first Galilean legion waiting for them, ready to go on revolt, ready to avenge John's death. And so their quiet getaway turns into another crowd. Jesus heals the sick, and it gets late. And everybody's hungry because an army marches on its stomach, and there's not many logistics type people in this group. And Jesus says, the disciples say, "Send these people away. If we're not going to be an army today, send them away so they can go get something to eat." And Jesus says, "No, you feed them." In the stroke, or in the blink of an eye, the disciples go from being generals to being waiters. And they split 5 loaves and 2 fish among 5,000 men and assorted women and children. And these generals turned waiters are sent off in a boat to brave an adverse wind while Jesus disperses the crowd and goes to pray. And he's gone a long time, and the disciples are well out into the Sea of Galilee, rowing and doing their best to make the other side, but not having much luck. And I can imagine for Peter and Andrew and for James and John, the fishermen in the bunch, the guys who know Galilee, it's pretty terrifying. I'm sure that they have seen the wreckage in the morning of their friends and family and colleagues who were out fishing overnight when a storm blew up, and all that's left of their friends and loved ones are splintered pieces of boat and maybe a tunic or two. And so these guys are struggling across the lake, and I mean, let's look at the day they've had. I mean, John is dead. And in case you didn't know, this is the first person to die in the kingdom in Matthew. The first of the body count has begun. It started. The stakes just got higher, and instead of getting a chance to be alone and deal with these higher stakes, Jesus and the 12 get to spend their entire afternoon with the crowd, not coming to grips with what John's death means, but healing and feeding and dealing with people. And then Jesus tells them to go to the other side of the lake, the other side of the Sea of Galilee. Jesus, have you seen the wind? Do you see those clouds? I don't like the look of those clouds. Go, Peter. It'll be okay. Go. I'll meet you. And they go down to the shore to get in a boat. Jesus goes up the mountain to pray. I imagine they're exhausted. I imagine they're worn out physically and emotionally. This has been a trying day. And now we've thrown their own deaths into the mix. With each wave that comes over, I'm sure they're thinking, is this it? Is this the one? And so in the middle of the night, when they see a figure walking across the water to them, is it any wonder their first thought is, it's a ghost? Here he comes. The grim reaper has come for us all. This is how we go out, friends. It's been a good run. It's been nice knowing you. Hopefully we'll see each other in heaven. And they're terrified. And Jesus tells them, don't be afraid, it's only me. But ghosts can lie. And especially if that ghost is looking for your death, it's gonna lie to you. But Peter has a test. Peter knows exactly how to prove that this ghost is really Jesus. That this ghost is not lying to them when he says it's Jesus, don't be afraid. Peter tells the ghost, if it's really you, tell me to do the impossible. If it's really you, Jesus, tell me to get out of the boat and walk on the water like you are. Tell me to do the crazy thing. Get out of this perfectly safe boat, as the safest place we've got on the water, and walk on the water to you. That's how he's going to know. So when the ghost says, come on, Peter hops out of the boat and begins walking on the water to Jesus. Now, I imagine this is how it goes in Peter's head, right? He's walking on the water. That's Jesus. Of course I'm going to be walking on the water. Jesus told me to get out of the boat, so I got out of the boat. And then like the rational brain kicks in. Peter, you're walking on water. I'm what? Have you seen the wind? Do you see the size of these waves? I'm doing what? And down goes Peter, boosh, right into the water. I call this, kind of jokingly refer to it as the baptism of Peter. Peter gets out of the boat, walks to Jesus on the water, and then it's like, oh, I'm walking on water. And it's like a cartoon character in a Bugs Bunny film who's like running across the thin air. And it's only the moment when they realize, I'm not walking on the ground anymore, that they fall. That's kind of what's happening to Peter. Peter's walking on the water. Everything's going great. And then he realizes, I'm walking on the water. Holy crap. And then boom, down he goes. And he's like, help me, save me. And Jesus pulls him up. And they walk back. Peter, why did you doubt? Man, Peter, you were walking on water. You were doing it. So many times I think we want to make fun of Peter. Oh, Peter, come on, man. What's going on? The water, the waves. Oh, that's just little bitty things. You were walking on water. How many of us have the guts to do that? To embrace the crazy, the insanity that Jesus is calling us to. Because that's what Jesus is calling us to. See, when we did our study of the Sermon on the Mount and we looked at this way of life, one of the things that kept coming back to me is how impossible it is, how improbable it is. Blessed are the meek, they shall inherit the earth. No, blessed are the powerful, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are the people who take advantage of others. They're going to inherit the earth. And Jesus says, no, you're wrong. Blessed are the meek. Blessed are the people who know how to control it. Blessed are the people who don't always have to assert their power and position and privilege. They shall inherit the earth. You see, Jesus is describing a way of life that is completely counterintuitive to the world and to what we've been taught. It looks insane. Paul describes it this way, that in preaching Christ, he preaches a stumbling block to Jews. I'm kind of ad-libbing. It's from 1 Corinthians, if you want to really look it up and correct me here. It's 1 Corinthians chapter 1, I believe. You know, it's foolishness to Greeks and a stumbling block to Jews. That's what it is. It's crazy. No one in their right mind would believe this guy. No one in their right mind would do what Jesus tells them to do. But here it is. Peter says, I'm going to know it's Jesus when he tells me to do something crazy. And Lord, if it's you, tell me to get out of the boat. And Jesus says, come on. I don't know about you, but I kind of feel like one of those 12 guys in that boat. Worn out, emotionally, physically, just strung out, beaten down, battered. You know, you watch the news long enough and you just begin to think, well, it was a good run. It's been nice knowing you guys. And Jesus comes. In the midst of our weariness, in the midst of our brokenness, in the midst of our agonies, in the midst of our doubts, in the midst of our lives. And he says, come follow me. Come and do the crazy. Come follow me. And for those of us who have tried, we can attest it is like walking on water. It is unnatural. It is difficult. And it's not necessarily something that you want to think too much about. Love your enemies. If someone strikes you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. If somebody forces you to carry his luggage 1 mile, go a second. When you pray, don't be all gaudy and pray, out on the street corners. Go into a closet. Pray for the one who sees in secret. When you give, don't blow a trumpet and make a big scene like people tend to do. No. When you give in such a way that your right hand doesn't even know what your left hand is doing. Crazy. Absolutely crazy, nut job way of living. And when we try to do it, it's going to feel like walking on the water. But the really crazy thing about this whole thing is that with Jesus, it's possible. With Jesus there, Peter gets out of the boat and walks on water. And with Jesus there, it's equally possible for us to be and do what he's called us to do. Love our enemies. Pray for those who persecute us. Be a force of revolutionary change in a world that's going to the dogs. It's probably not going to come when we are ready. It's probably not going to happen when we are at our most powerful and our most energetic, when all our forces are marshaled. No, it's probably going to happen on a day like that day in Matthew 14, where we're struggling with deep existential crises. Are we really serious about this? I mean, people are starting to die for this. And it's going to happen at times when we've got nothing left in the tank. And Jesus is going to show up and he's going to say, come follow me. Step out of the boat. Walk on the water a bit. It's cool out here. It's nice. The spray from the water is refreshing. Don't think about it too much. Just come and do it. Friends, that's what Jesus is calling us. That's the call of the kingdom, is to be that force of change, to embrace the crazy that is Jesus and to follow him into the world, out on the water, and make a difference. Make the kind of difference that lasts. Make the kind of difference that changes lives, because that's what's at stake here. We're not going to save the world in the boat. All we're going to do is guarantee our own death. Time to get out and follow him. Let's go walk on water. Thanks for watching.